Louis, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with me today. I'd like you, if you could, to do a very brief introduction, just to let people know a bit about your background, and then we'll go through a few questions.
Yeah, essentially, as a student, I started off physics and mathematics as an undergraduate. I sort of flunked out of varsity, but it sort of gave me the initial sort of gut feeling that the art of tracking might well be the origin of science itself.
Right. So it was that early on in your career you had that kind of gut instinct.
That was when I was about 20 years old.
Yeah.
But it took me it actually took me 10 years to complete my first two books.
Right.
To a point where I had a rigorous enough theory that I was able to publish.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it takes another 10 to 20 years for that to sort of get through to the main stream. So it's quite a long process.
Yeah, right. Well, so Louis, I first came across your work sort of directly through the book Born to Run. And have you sort of noted that perhaps since the publication of that book, which has had a lot of success in its own right, has that sparked any additional interest in your work that you've picked up?
In fact, I'm actually quite surprised in the sense that because my work's has drawn interest from various fields, like in nature conservation, tracking, and so on. But these are all small little niche fields, and often fields where people don't even know about each other. Yeah. Whereas the Born to Run certainly seems to have touched a nerve. In a sense.
Of course, yes. In the book, your work around the persistence hunt is described as potentially being the origin of science, and you were just saying that was something that you really that idea came to you as a young man. Was there anything in particular that you recall, any kind of aha moments where suddenly you all clicked into place?
Well, I think the first sort of gut feeling came when I was studying physics and math, and I was also interested in tracking, and tracks and science involves using your imagination to interpret signs of behavior that are hidden from view, in the same way that particles can't be seen. Yes. Gravity can't be seen. In physics, you deal with causal connections that cannot be seen.
Yes.
But pretty much took me 10 years to develop that gut feeling. So, there was actually quite a few aha moments spread over a period of 10 years.
Right. How would you describe the origin of science to the layperson? If someone makes a claim that they perhaps discovered the origin of science, that sounds like a very big claim. But what's behind that? How would you describe that to someone who's just approached this idea for the first time?
Well, for a start, it's also it actually requires quite a different understanding of what science is. There's a lot of preconceived notions about science being a Western invention, whereas if you understand science as being something that is innate to the human mind, it resolves a paradox in human evolution, and this is that if science were invented by the Greeks or in the Renaissance, and our human mind evolved while we were hunter-gatherers, how come we are able to do science? So how can the brain of a hunter-gatherer do physics and mathematics?
Yes, right.
So to resolve that paradox, if you understand the art of tracking as being a science, it actually makes sense how people without university degrees can engage in scientific reasoning.
Yes.
And science in that sense is where you interpret signs, you create hypothetical explanations in order to make predictions.
I actually inadvertently first came across your work when I was watching David Attenborough's Life of Mammals. I think that was around 2003 that was broadcast here in the UK. So I understand you're involved with that project. Is that correct?
Yeah. Essentially, they contacted me. I've been working with Karawa and Ngate and so on. I met Ngate back in 1985.
So just to be clear, these are the guys that actually do the persistence hunt.
Yeah. So in fact, in 1990, I actually ran the persistence hunt with Nate, and
Wow.
and Karawa, I met him in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, by the time we filmed this hunt in 2001, by that time, Nate and Kwasi was too old to do it, and Karawa was still in fact, I believe one of the very last hunters who could still do it.
Right,
Karawa,
right.
who, as far as I know, may well be one of the very last persistence hunters,
Yeah.
which is a tradition that may well go back 2 million years. He's also the most proficient in using this handheld computer with which we developed the CyberTracker.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And from a cultural point of view, change is natural. I mean, all cultures change over time, and all cultures adopt artifacts from other cultures when it suits them and when it's economically more viable.
Yeah.
When I did persistence hunt, I was 30 years old, which I think was at the peak of my fitness.
Yeah.
And it was pretty spontaneous. You know, I mean,
right.
I'd go on field trips of 3, 6, up to 9 months where you do a lot of walking.
Yes.
I mean, you usually start at first light, you walk all day long, and you come back to your camp after sunset.
Right, right.
So I mean, I was pretty fit at the time, and it was pretty.
Your organisation is called CyberTracker.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about your organisation?
Well, essentially, it actually started with the idea of creating employment for Bushman trackers. In fact, NATA actually asked me in 1990 that they're struggling to survive. The wildlife have been decimated in the Kalahari, and they literally cannot survive as hunter-gatherers anymore. So they desperately need jobs. And of course, many of them they don't have formal schooling.
Sure. And
one of the best opportunities, I believe, is in creating job opportunities for traditional trackers.
Mm-hmm.
And the stumbling block there being is that they can't read or write.
Right.
And so that's why we developed the CyberTracker interface for a touchscreen handheld computers with a GPS.
Yes.
Where you go through a series of screens with little icons, and you just touch the icon, you go to the next screen, you touch an icon.
Right.
So going through a series of screens, they can actually capture very complex and very detailed data, even if they cannot read or write, and very rapidly. They can capture, say, 10 fields of information in 10 seconds flat.
Right.
Because of their tracking skills, they can actually interpret aspects of animal behavior that, for example, Western scientists wouldn't even pick up on.
Yes.
And they can monitor species that Western scientists will miss because, like, even right now, you could tell each mongoose species from its footprints.
Right. Right.
So there's a huge range of animal species, as well as detailed animal behavior, where you can get where you can actually get very good data from animal tracking.
Yes.
Which you can't get in any other way.
Right.
So the whole idea was to create this software for handheld computers that would enable non-lithic trackers to capture very detailed scientific data.
Yeah.
But an interesting side effect of that is that the icon interface also happens to be a very efficient data capture interface, even for a PhD scientist who can hopefully read or write.
Right.
But it's much more efficient than text input or pencil and paper or whatever the case might be.
Right.
So it's now being used quite widely throughout the world in national parks by scientific researchers and citizen science projects and so on.
Excellent. And so you're coming across to present for us at the Barefoot Connections Conference in June. Have you got? I mean, we may have covered a lot of your material already, but have you got any sort of little insights into what you plan to present there? I
thought it would be nice to just sort of give a brief introduction to my own personal experience of this persistence hunt event that I've just described to you.
Yeah.
And then I thought it might be nice just to explain from an evolutionary point how I believe persistence hunting evolved over 2 million years.
Yeah, fantastic.
And also parallel to that, there is not only how the evolution of endurance running evolved in parallel to the evolution of the brain.
Yeah.
And how the two almost sort of co-evolved. In other words, persistence hunting wouldn't have been possible without the evolution of the brain and vice versa.
Sure. That sounds fantastic.
And I think even marathon runners would appreciate the role of the mind in the success of a race. It's not just physical endurance. It's the willpower, and there's a psychological dimension to being able to push yourself to actually cross that line, and actually almost like, it's not just a physical thing. It's actually a mental thing as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. That sounds great, and I'm really looking forward to both meeting you and hearing your talk in London.